Ilonkinen!
Belură de nuștă și marambur. Acum nordimonan I gerdu si mor sepsur.
Dwarf Fortress is a colony management sim that has been in active development by two brothers, Zach and Tarn Adams, for around 2 decades. In that time, the game has been supported purely by donation of the fans that play it. In 2022, the brothers decided to team up with Kit Fox Games to release Dwarf Fortress on Steam with a fresh coat of paint to make it more accessible for a wider audience. You see, before this, the game used ASCII graphics, essentially numbers, characters, and keyboard symbols to represent what was going on in the game. It was to most, including myself, absolutely unreadable. So unreadable, in fact, that as much as I wanted to try the game based on what I'd heard of it, I just couldn't be bothered. There were total conversion art packs you could use to give the game more personality, but then you'd still have to learn how to play the game, which was entirely with the keyboard. So along comes the Steam version, which completely revamps the controls, graphics, and added quality of life features, but believe it or not, it most likely is still going to be too much for most people. That is because Dwarf Fortress is one of the most complicated colony simulators that has and probably ever will exist. It's the game that has inspired dozens of future titles, such as Minecraft, RimWorld, Prison Architect, and more. Dwarf Fortress is all things city builder, production management sim, society builder, and story generator. The simplest way I can describe Dwarf Fortress is if SimCity fulfilled its promise of every citizen actually being simulated to the level The Sims is. You play from this high-up, omnipresent perspective, managing a city of hundreds of dwarves all doing their own thing, but at any point you can zoom in and find out exactly what is going on in any given dwarf's life. Starting out, and even 100 plus hours in, it's all a bit much, but it's important to remember that all this detail is there so you can get a picture of what a dwarf is like. It gives you the building blocks to begin using your imagination to actually consider what a day in the dwarf's life might be like. You follow them as they wake up, go to church, go to work, get a drink at the dining hall, and interact with other dwarves. When you've got over 200 dwarves like I had in my most recent playthrough, it can be difficult to get too invested in any one given dwarf's life, but you could if you wanted to. When I play, I tend to give my starting dwarves nicknames so I can keep track of them as my settlement grows into a fortress. After that, I tend to give nicknames to dwarves that accomplish notable feats. I would name dwarves who slew forgotten beasts with the name of famous wrestlers, or crafts dwarfs who create legendary works after the great artisans in fiction. I might only have 20 named dwarves out of 200, but at any given time I can think to myself, I wonder what the Undertaker is up to. Find them and catch up with how their past few months have gone for them. Another way I go about following the stories in my fort is simply just checking in on different rooms. Who's praying today to what god? What and who is going on in my dining hall? What has the king been keeping in his personal chest? Zoomed out, it doesn't look like much is going on at all, but zooming in on literally anything or anyone will reveal more detail than you could have possibly asked for. It's remarkable. Introduced with the Steam edition of the game is a tutorial which will get you just through the basics of the game, but is in no way going to teach you even 10% of what you need to know. You'll probably hate hearing this, but you're going to need YouTube guides, and you're going to need a lot of them. You're also probably never getting to the point where you can play this game without alt-tabbing often to ask Google questions. Fun questions like, why are my dwarves starving? Why do my dwarves keep getting into fights? And everyone's favourite, how the hell do I build a moat in Dwarf Fortress? When starting a world of Dwarf Fortress, the game will generate a history of it. It's amazing, and I don't quite understand how it all works, but the game basically starts at year 1 and lets the simulation run for a set amount of years. This generates dwarves, cultures, artifacts, creatures, civilizations, you name it. By the time you actually get to play, you're already existing in a story world that you are now a part of. Once you've started your fort, the game continues to simulate the world, both in and outside of it. Once you lose or retire your fort, you can then choose to start a new fort in the same world. The dwarves from your previous fort become part of the history, their exploits noted and available to see in the game's Legends mode. Long story short, Legends mode is like a Wikipedia for your world. You can type in the name of pretty much anything you can remember and get the history of the subject. For example, typing in a dwarf's name will give you the entire history of that dwarf. In this history are what are essentially hyperlinks that will open a separate tab to that subject's history. Say I looked up a dwarf named Stone Cold Steve Austin and noticed that over the years he became attached to and took ownership of a legendary hammer. Let's say that I retired the fort that hammer was in and played 50 years in a different fortress. Once I retire that fortress, I can then go into Legends mode and check what has happened in those 50 years to that hammer. Maybe it got a new owner, or maybe Stone Cold is still wielding it to this day. This is one of the many things that makes DF so special. Each fortress you play is part of a continued history that can go for as long as you can keep playing through the years. In that sense, I encourage you to take notes while playing. Write down the names of things that you are interested in, and between each fort, check your Legends mode and see how it's all going. As of writing, you cannot both have an active fortress going and use Legends mode, which is a bit of a bummer. You have to retire your fort you're playing in, check Legends mode, and then unretire it to continue playing. Like a lot of things in DF, I'm sure there is some workaround to make it easier to use, but I just thought I'd let you know. Playing this game is to be continuously learning new things and dreaming of bigger, better ways for your dwarves to spend their time. The standard start of a game of Dwarf Fortress is 7 dwarves with enough materials to survive for a while. Long enough for you to establish a home base for yourself, as well as a steady food and drink supply. The map you start out in DF, also known as an embark, like most things in the game, is procedurally generated based on the modifiers of the tile you chose. This affects stuff like the resources you'll find, the creatures you'll come across, and who your neighbours are. The 3 main other races that I've noticed in the game are humans, elves, and goblins. Elves and humans will be your trading partners, where goblins will be one of your main enemies to deal with. They will periodically raid your fortress, demanding artifacts you hold, or just try to straight up take them from you. The first thing you'll want to do is dig yourself out a place to start stashing your stuff and housing your dwarves. One of the coolest things about Dwarf Fortress, and something I haven't really seen before, is this game's use of Z levels. There is something like 300 different layers of elevation, ranging from being high in the sky at plus 150, going all the way down to the core of the planet at minus 150. This provides for a mind-bogglingly large play space, so large that your in-game frame rate would surely tank to the single digits before you came close to exploring it all. After digging out a little hidey hole for yourself, you'll want to make sure your dwarves are fed and liquored up. It's important to note here that you do not have any direct control over your dwarves. There is no selecting them and telling them to prioritize a job. You do get some direct control over your military dwarves, being able to issue a few different orders, but that's about it. This can lead to a lot of situations of your dwarves not doing exactly what you want and having to figure out why they aren't following your orders. The way you control your dwarves are through work orders, labour designations, stockpiles, and zones. Work orders are simply putting in an order for X amount of an item. This will send the order to all available workshops, and dwarves designated to that kind of work will get to it. Labour designations are to control what dwarf does what, stockpiles are what items go where, and zones are generally room designations. Starting out, your stockpiles will probably be quite messy, but a lot of satisfaction can be gained from setting them up in an efficient manner. For example, keeping all your wood near your carpentry workshops, rock near your stoneworking, minerals near your smelter, etc, etc. Once you set up these things, your dwarves will just go about their days and get to work. As I said, sometimes you will have unfinished jobs and be unable to figure out why. The game's notification system will most of the time give you the information on why a job isn't being completed, but it can also be a job in itself to figure out how to fix the issue. When things are going well in your fort, word will most likely spread around about this new happening fort in the area, and more folk will begin to migrate in. Soon there will be demand for nobles, dwarves with special roles in your fort who come with certain room requirements such as their own dining halls, bedrooms, and tombs. At this point, you probably have a pretty decent handle of how the game is played and how to run a successful fort. You might start to feel like the game is pretty easy, and that the hardest part about it is knowing what all the different rocks and minerals are good for. You'd be right in that, but then comes in the game's tagline of "losing is fun." It took a little while for it to sink in for me, but this is a game called Dwarf Fortress, and these are the kind of dwarves that like to dig deep and dig greedily. You too should adopt this mantra. Yeah, you might have a nice and tidy fort, but what are your nobles' rooms made of? What are your taverns and dining halls lined with? If your answer isn't at least solid gold, then you haven't digged enough. There are a bazillion different ways to play Dwarf Fortress, but until you get into mega projects and themed forts, personally my goal has always just been to make the grandest fort possible. A place of envy for all other dwarves, with halls of legend etched forever into the annals of history. If I ever find myself getting bored of a fortress, being greedy and looking for trouble is always a surefire remedy for it. Graphically, I think this game is absolutely gorgeous to look at. The sprites are detailed, reflecting the different appearances and equipment of the dwarfs. I just think that presentation-wise this game is so full of life, despite not being animated in any way. There are light sound effects to represent what is going on in the scene, but most of it is ambient background sound. The game comes with a killer soundtrack that even after 100 hours I haven't deigned to mute yet, which is a huge endorsement for me. Sometimes I even wake up with it in my head still. There is so much to like about Dwarf Fortress, and I have almost nothing but praise for it, but there are some caveats. Dwarf Fortress to me is a heavy game to play. There is always so much to think about, and it can all be a bit much. Unless you're in the right mood, it can be a difficult game to hit the play button on. Whenever I do though, I end up sinking in for hours and usually need to tear myself away, but the base reluctance is always there. It's a perfect lazy Sunday kind of game. I've had plenty of days where I start playing at 8 AM and don't even think to go outside until late afternoon. The UI of the game is, well, to me pretty functional, but if you compare it to other games out there, and you will find it to be extremely lacking in the quality of life department. Mousing over things will often not give you much information about what that thing actually does or how you should be using it. If I wanted to know exactly what a workshop was for, or what workshop I'd need to build a certain thing, generally a Google search is your quickest way of finding anything out. A specific example of something I found particularly annoying in the beginning was setting up production orders. See, to set a production order, you need to know the exact wording of what you're building. My dwarves are complaining they had no goblets to drink out of, so I type in goblet. What I get is a huge list of different materials that I don't have access to yet. I try to type in rock goblet, rock being a general term for any rock-like material you have in your fort. Still nothing. I had to do a Google search to find out that goblets made from rock are actually called rock mugs. Another example is equipping your dwarves. There are like 20 different designations of what a dwarf can wear. Greaves, high boots, low boots, sock, chest plates, chainmail, robes. It's difficult to know what the hell you actually need to fully kit out your military dwarves, that I'm still not 100% sure to this day. I just buy any and all armor that traders bring in and hope for the best that my dwarves are fully set up. The thing is though, is that these things are only troublesome until you've internalized what you have to do. At this point I am pretty quick with the hotkeys and can set up a new fort with relatively minimal effort, but it takes time and a willingness to learn to get there. And that is the main takeaway of Dwarf Fortress. Getting started with this game can feel like learning a second language, and for most that is too much to ask. Two things I want to mention before I wrap up this review is DF Hack and Adventure Mode. DF Hack is a mod that you might have noticed in my footage, which is a tool used for a wide variety of things. I'm not going to go into detail here, but it includes tons of quality of life features that I couldn't imagine playing without. I'd go as far as to say it's a must-have if you're going to play this game long term, but starting out I'd say play a while without it to learn why you'll need it in the future. It's a lifesaver of a mod, and the devs of the game have a close relationship with the creators of it. Adventure Mode is, as of writing, only available in beta form for the Steam version. I haven't played it, but from what I understand, it allows you to create a character or party of characters and explore your Dwarf Fortress world. You can visit your previous forts, interact with characters, and basically play the game as if it's a roguelike RPG. You can seemingly make lasting impressions on the world you've created, so on paper it all sounds really cool. A new way to view the world that you've had a hand in shaping. As I haven't played it, I can't really speak on it, but it seems to be a pretty significant part of the experience that I hope to try in the future. I made this video with the intention of selling this wonderful game to you, because once you learn the basics, you've then unlocked access to the deepest simulation game there is. All the little negatives I mentioned, from a different perspective, heap praise on the granularity of the simulation. Dwarf Fortress is like your own personal grand fantasy world that lives on your computer. It's the ultimate Tamagotchi, where instead of looking after one little monster, you're looking after hundreds. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next video.